The Supreme Court has adopted an ethics code. Why might they do that? Well, I think many of you know why. Clarence Thomas is one reason why. But the ethics code has no mechanism for enforcement. So it is apparently another one of these optics decisions. The Associated Press reports, Supreme Court says it is adopting a code of ethics, but it has no means of enforcement. This is the first code of ethics ever adopted by the Supreme Court in the face of sustained criticism over undisclosed trips and gifts from wealthy benefactors to some justices. But the code lacks a means of enforcement. Great, we have a code. We won't be enforcing it. Sounds good. The policy was agreed to by all 9 justices, big surprise, does not appear to impose any significant new requirements, and leaves compliance entirely to each justice. Well, I'm a justice. I have a code. I may not have abided by the code. What's my punishment? I decide that my punishment is nothing. The justices said they have long adhered to ethics standards and suggested that criticism over the court over ethics was the product of misunderstanding rather than anybody actually doing anything wrong. Now, over the last year, we've learned about all sorts of apparent misdeeds ethically by Supreme Court justices. We have the undisclosed luxury trips and the wealthy benefactors of people like Clarence Thomas, who got trips, and real estate transactions funded by this Texas billionaire Harlan Crow. We then found out, in addition to that, that Justice Clarence Thomas failed to repay a large portion of an RV loan that he got from a friend. His friend gave him the loan, but then repaid most of the loan himself, $267,000. A lot of this, as you can see, centers around Justice Clarence Thomas, but he's not the only one. Justice Samuel Alito also took a luxury fishing trip with a Republican billionaire who has had cases before the Supreme Court. Alito did not recuse himself from the cases. He also did not even disclose that he was the beneficiary of one of those trips as required by law. So should there be some sort of ethics code for the Supreme Court? Absolutely. Should there be some means of enforcement or some kind of consequence if you don't abide by it? Without a means for enforcement, it's all pretty damn meaningless, to be perfectly frank. And so this does reek of, hey, we're taking some heat. Here's something we're going to do. We're going to claim we've basically been doing it anyway, but we're formalizing it. And then if nobody abides by it, or if we don't abide by it, there's really going to be no consequence anyway. There needs to be broader reform to the Supreme Court. I've talked for a while about term limits and a schedule of nominations such that we know in advance how many justices will the next 4-year term allow for the president of the United States. With 9 justices, you would simply have to figure out a rotation. Maybe it's 18 years, maybe it's 20 years, maybe it's 12 years. Different people can come to a different number so that we don't have this situation where we go, okay, wait, it's 2016, Trump versus Hillary. How many Supreme Court picks will the president get? Well, it might be 1. How old are the justices? Have they expressed interest in retiring? How's their health? How is this all looking? Trump might get 1, he might get 2, he might get 3. Well, turned out that it was on the higher end of the spectrum rather than the lower end. We could have a system where we know in advance, in the next 4-year term, there will be 1 nomination. There will be 2 nominations, whatever the case may be. And at least it would make it a little more concrete. It's not a maybe. If Trump defeats Hillary, he gets 2 picks. This will swing the court from 5-4 to 5-4 the other way. Now it's practical and it's concrete. This is just one idea, one reform that should be made. But certainly an ethics code with teeth is 100% necessary. Am I wrong? Am I too cynical? Is there more to this ethics code and I'm just not seeing it? Let me know in a comment. Let me know in an email. So I wrote another book for kids. The first book was Think Like a Detective. The point of the first book was to teach kids critical thinking, which Republicans don't want them to learn, because when kids learn critical thinking, they don't vote for Republicans. The new book is Think Like a Scientist. This is a fun adventure teaching kids the scientific method. Again, Republicans aren't big on kids learning the scientific method because when they do, they're less likely to fall for Republican lies about climate change and vaccines and so many other things. You can get the new book as well as the first one at davidpakman.com/book. This is part of the Adventures in Thinking series. Can you imagine that we're doing this? We are. davidpakman.com/book. 13,500 copies of the first book have sold. I'll bring you an update soon on sales for the second book. Think like a scientist. davidpakman.com/book.